While dog people are out there obsessing over obedience training, training courses, and getting validation from a creature that would happily follow a burglar out of the house for a piece of beef jerky, there is a massive group of us who are playing a completely different game. And let's be honest, the rest of the world thinks we're a little crazy for it. They talk about ownership, they talk about commands, but if you live with a cat, you know that those words mean absolutely nothing. You know that you didn't pick your animal picked you. And according to 10,000 years of history, you are absolutely right. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you will completely change how you look at that creature sleeping on your keyboard right now. Here's the thing nobody talks about, that feeling of being chosen, that distinct sensation that a cat has walked into a room full of people, ignored every single one of them, and decided that your lap is the only one that matters, isn't just you projecting human emotions onto a pet. It is a psychological dynamic that has been hardwired into the human experience since we were living in mud huts. We have this cultural narrative that dogs are man's best friend because they listen to us. But the ancients knew that cats were something far more powerful because they judged us. Think about the standard for loyalty in the ancient world. You have Homer's Odyssey. You have Argos, the dog who waits 20 years on a pile of manure just to wag his tail at Odysseus and die. It's tragic, it's beautiful, and it's absolute blind devotion. But the ancients knew that a cat would never do that. A cat's psychology isn't built on servitude, it's built on assessment. For the longest time, historians thought this relationship started in Egypt, but they were wrong. In 1983, on the island of Cyprus, archaeologists dug up a grave from 7500 BCE, that is thousands of years before the pyramids. In this grave, they found a human, and 40 centimeters away, facing the same direction, buried with the same care, was an 8-month-old cat. This wasn't a wild animal thrown in a pit, it was a partner. This discovery proves that the choice didn't happen because we forced it. We didn't domesticate cats like we did cows or horses. We didn't drag them into our villages. They chose to move in. They looked at our grain stores, they looked at the rodents, and they decided, I'll stay. It was a mutual pact. They didn't need us to survive, which makes the fact that they stayed infinitely more significant. And as we moved from the Stone Age into the Bronze Age, that psychological weight of being chosen by a cat went from a practical arrangement to a spiritual obsession. You want to talk about obsession? Let's talk about Egypt. We all know the Egyptians loved cats, but most people get the psychology wrong. They didn't just think cats were cute. They believed that when a cat walked into your house, it was literally a vessel of the divine energy of Bastet. Bastet wasn't just some random goddess, she was the daughter of the sun god Ra, the gentler side of the lioness Sekhmet, who was known as the Lady of Slaughter. So when a cat chose to sit by your fire, it wasn't just looking for heat, it was bringing the protection of the cosmos into your living room. To an ancient Egyptian, the presence of a cat was a daily confirmation that your life was in balance, what they called ma'at. It meant your home was a fortress against chaos. And here is where it gets incredibly intense. The Greek historian Herodotus traveled to Egypt around 450 BCE, and he was completely freaked out by what he saw. He wrote that when a house cat died of natural causes, the family didn't just bury it and move on. They plunged into deep mourning. They would literally shave off their eyebrows. Think about the psychological impact of that. You are walking around your community, physically marked by your grief, telling everyone, the divine presence has left my home. This wasn't a game. The choice of the cat was so sacred that violating it was a death sentence. There's a record from the historian Diodorus Siculus about a Roman soldier who accidentally killed a cat in Egypt. Now, Rome was the superpower. You do not mess with Rome. But the Egyptians didn't care. An angry mob gathered and lynched the soldier. They executed a citizen of the most powerful empire on earth because he disrespected the vessel of the cat. That is how deep this psychology goes. To be chosen by a cat was to be witnessed by the gods. To harm one was to invite the end of the world. But wait, it gets weirder. If you think the Egyptians were intense, let's look at the Vikings. You don't typically associate massive, bearded Norse warriors with kittens, but the connection there is just as strong, only the psychology is different. In Norse mythology, the cat wasn't a delicate vessel, it was a beast of power. The goddess Freya, the deity of war, love, and magic, didn't ride a horse. She rode a chariot pulled by two massive cats. The texts call them fress, which implies a hissing animal or a snarler. These weren't your average house cats. These were essentially fuzzy bodyguards. There's a tradition that says these cats were a gift from Thor himself. Imagine that. The god of thunder finds a magical, singing cat named Bayun, takes his kittens, and gives them to the goddess of war. These cats were strong enough to pull a deity across the sky. So when a Viking household had a cat, the psychology wasn't, "I own this pet." It was, "I have an ally." It was actually common for Viking brides to receive a kitten as a wedding gift. This wasn't just, "Here's something cute." It was the installation of a spiritual security system. The Norse believed cats could see spirits, that they could see in the dark, that they were guarding the threshold between the living and the dead. If a cat chose to sleep in your bed, it wasn't just stealing your warmth, it was watching your back. The psychological implication here is mutual respect. You didn't command a creature that pulled Freya's chariot, you hosted it, you thanked it. To be chosen by a Norse cat meant you were strong enough to be worth protecting. Now, before the comment section explodes with, "But my cat just eats and sleeps," let me introduce you to the man who basically invented the modern cat-person psychology. Fast forward to 889 CE, Imperial Japan, Emperor Uda. This guy was the Emperor of Japan, a man with absolute power. And yet, when you read his diary, he sounds exactly like us. He received a black cat as a gift, and he completely lost his mind over it. He writes in his diary, the Kanpyo Gyoki, and he's not talking about the cat as a god or a tool, he's talking about it as a soulmate. He writes, "The color of the fur is peerless, reminiscent of the deepest ink." He describes the cat curling up like a coin and standing with a cry that expresses profound loneliness, like a black dragon floating above the clouds. This is the first time in history we see the secret clearly written down, the belief that the cat understands you. Uda writes, "I said to the cat, 'Since you possess the forces of yin and yang, you must be able to understand me, right?' Then the cat sighed and kept staring up at me." Wild, right? 1,000 years ago, an emperor is looking at his cat, convinced that the animal is sighing because it has deep, unspoken feelings. He says, "I am convinced it is superior to all other cats." That is the core of the psychology, the belief that your connection is unique, that the cat sees you specifically. And then you have Lu Yu in China, a few centuries later. This guy is arguably the first self-proclaimed cat slave in history. He wrote poems apologizing to his cats for being too poor to buy them fish. He writes, "The fire is warm and the wool blanket is soft. My cat servant and I would rather stay inside." He calls the cat his servant jokingly, but admits he is the one doing the serving. He even suggests that his cats are his children from a past life, reincarnated to keep him company. This is a massive psychological leap. Lu Yu isn't just saying, "I like this animal," he's saying, "This animal chose me because of karma." He believes the bond transcends death. When he couldn't afford food, he felt genuine guilt, not because he was a bad owner, but because he was failing a friend who had chosen him despite his poverty. He realized what every cat owner eventually realizes: the cat doesn't care about your status, it cares about your vibe. But there is another layer to this, and it's a bit darker. In Japanese folklore, this choice wasn't always benevolent. You have the legends of the bakeneko, the shape-shifting cat. The idea was that cats were constantly watching you, judging your morality. If you were a good person, like the samurai at Gotokuji Temple who was saved from lightning by a beckoning cat, the cat brought you fortune. But if you were cruel, if you violated the pact, the cat could transform. It could become a nekomata, a two-tailed monster, or a kasha, a flaming demon that stole corpses. This reveals the anxiety underlying the relationship. The cat is a mirror. Because they are so independent, because they stare at us with those unblinking eyes, we project our own conscience onto them. If a dog loves you, it might just be because you have food, but if a cat loves you, it feels like a moral acquittal. It feels like proof that you are essentially good. So why does this matter? Why do we care so much about the psychology of a 10-pound animal? Here's the kicker. It comes down to the difference between unconditional and conditional love. Dog love is amazing, but it's often unconditional. You can have a bad day, you can be a jerk, and the dog will still forgive you. But cat love is conditional. It has to be earned every single day. When a cat chooses to sit on your lap, it is an active decision. It is saying, I have assessed the environment, I have assessed you, and I deem you worthy of my trust. That hits the human brain different. It triggers a reward system that is far more addictive than guaranteed affection. It validates us. It tells us that we are calm, that we are safe, that we are chosen. The ancient world tells us that when a cat chooses you, it is an act of high-level discernment. The Egyptians believed it meant your soul was balanced. The Norse believed it meant you were a warrior worth guarding. Emperor Uda believed it meant you were understood on a spiritual level. And Lu Yu believed it meant you were loved across lifetimes. So, the next time someone tells you that cats are aloof or unloving, you don't need to argue. You just need to remember that you are part of a 10,000-year-old tradition. You haven't just been sat on, you have been weighed, you have been measured, and by the standards of a creature that has walked with gods and emperors, you have been chosen. If this resonated with you, if you know the profound honor of being chosen by a cat, please leave a like, share this with the other cat people in your life, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more.